The Reverend and the Rabbi, Faith and Eggs. Reverend Bill Crawford, Senior Pastor of Larchmont Avenue Church, and Rabbi Jeff Sirkman, Senior Rabbi of Larchmont Temple, are friends and colleagues in our community who get together regularly for breakfast and always lively discussion. Join the Reverend Bill and Rabbi Jeff at their latest meal at the Nautilus Diner. Enjoy a breakfast of faith and eggs with the Reverend and the Rabbi.
Rabbi Jeff.
Reverend Bill, fancy meeting you here, my friend.
Brother, here we are.
How are you?
God bless you.
God bless
oh my
you.
gosh. Here we are.
At the Nautilus.
At the Nautilus. Here we go. Oh, it's coffee.
Here we go. Summer mode.
Good morning, good
Summer
morning.
mode. Even Reverend Bill doesn't have a tie on.
Even Reverend Bill.
Look at that.
There you go. Iced coffee.
Iced coffee
For
it is.
usted. Gracias muchísimas.
How are you? Everything well?
Sí, sí.
Thank you. Good, good, good.
Okay, good. Do you want to put the order in?
We can always put the order in anytime.
We'll put the order in.
Anytime.
Put the order in. Okay. We'll be here
Abel's always ready.
through next week with this half and half, or as you would say, half and half.
Half and half.
Thank you so much. Great, great, great. So, Abel, is it time? Yeah. You know, I'd like to go a whole new paradigm. I've been thinking about this. Oatmeal.
I knew it. I knew it was coming.
Can I have a bowl of oatmeal with brown sugar on the side?
Okay.
And an order of rye tooth, please. Terrific.
Thank you.
I will have, if he's going to do a new paradigm, I will have, how about 2 eggs over easy, Swiss cheese melted on top of each.
Okay.
No potatoes, no toast.
Okay.
That's the whole thing.
Great,
Thank
great,
you.
great. We're on our way.
Like the hottest day of the year. I think it's the second hottest day of the year. And Reverend Bill is getting oatmeal.
I know. I'm
You
I'm
have a craving?
a hot cereal fan. And by the way, I don't know if I've kind of violated the whole law, namely that here you are and here we are, Faith and Eggs at the diner, and I'm having oatmeal. I mean,
It's true.
know,
No eggs.
No eggs. I mean, really. So
I am keeping true to the.
Yeah. I want to thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, here it is. Yes, let's get straight on this date. It's
Oh my
the
gosh.
27th of, the 26th. 26th of July.
It's the 27th of December.
There we go.
And
Oh my gosh.
Gosh, we are.
What a news cycle we're on.
That would be an
Okay,
understatement, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it be an understatement?
Day 2 of the Democratic National Convention. And where is that being held?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, my hometown. I knew that answer, but yeah, what a story there.
Wow.
And then on the heels of the Republican National Convention in Cleveland last week, so much to say about that.
Yeah, I hear they're going to move the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just out of disgust. Anyway, no, not true. It's a difficult moments.
Really quite something. And then in the time since our last episode of Faith and Eggs at the Diner with the Reverend and Rabbi, numerous events in the world.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
We had Baton Rouge, we had St. Paul, and killings there of Avery Alton in Baton Rouge, Philando Castile in St. Paul, and then the Black Lives Matter march in Dallas, and upon that, the killing of 5 police in Dallas, and then subsequent to that, killing of police in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, you're noticing a theme here, a horrendous theme.
The truck massacre in Nice. Oh my gosh! And just last night, we got word of this awful set of killings in Japan at a mental health institution school at the hands of. And then here comes the stuff and steps of the conventions here in our country, and I don't know about most viewers, but I'm sure there's really a keen clamor and interest in watching the Reverend and the Rabbi to hear what we might say. I have to say, in quite serious note, in the past few weeks, on the heels of those events, I have had people in the middle of the week, stop me to say, "What are you going to be saying this Sunday?"
Yeah.
What are you going to be saying this Sunday? And in each of those moments, I mean, it seems like the Friday, Saturday news cycle gave rise to, something that, we needed to note, at least, in our prayers, as we got to Sunday. So here we are on Tuesday, July 26th, this Reverend and this Rabbi here at the table, in a world that is, William Butler Yeats on the heels of the Irish Revolution noted this wonderful, terrible, beautiful world about us. Goodness. So good morning. Good morning, Lars Maronek. Welcome to the Nautilus Diner with yours truly.
Well, here's the reality that my friend Reverend Bill sets forth. The sun is shining. It's risen yet again today. The birds are singing, and people are taking violent action against one another. Some things will never change. Our waiter's name is Abel. His brother was Cain. It starts a long time ago.
Was Abel's brother Cain?
I am not. You know what? There are some people who are a little bit literal.
There we go.
Right?
There we go.
But it's sad reality. And what do people look for? I have dear colleagues in other congregations and other synagogues who send out a bulletin or something every time there is another mass killing, another violent act in America, around the world. I tend not to do that, and Washington Temple, I don't think, tends not to need that. But a couple of times in the past, many sets of mass killings, we sent out a note from the clergy. We work every day, by the way, not just as this Reverend Bill. He's in church and in his study and doing what he needs to do, and meeting with people and counseling and helping and teaching. So people want an answer. They want a response from this spiritual leader, So what do we do? How do we respond? How do we transcend this? And that's the challenge. Yeah. And if you see both the RNC, the Republican National Convention, and the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, against the backdrop of that response, and again, Democratic National Convention is just playing out, but you will understand a very different take on our place and purpose in the world. I think that's ultimately very true. Very true. One way to respond is, if you don't agree with somebody 100%, or you think that they're very different from you, have breakfast with them.
There we go. And that
brings
us yet again to this table. A familiar spot, and as you're looking there over our shoulders, it occurs to me that we've never really commented on this scene here.
No, we did. I think we did once.
And a little, maybe once, but I'm not recalling what exactly we said. Maybe you do, but it reminds me of Philadelphia, and here's why. Philadelphia, scene of the Democratic National Convention, of course, 240 years ago was the scene of the Continental Congress. And the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And in that room, in Independence Hall, on Chestnut Street between 5th and 6th, the Congress gathered, and they went about their business to sign that declaration. And one of the pieces of furniture in that room happened to be, and legend has it that Ben Franklin himself sat on it, the furniture that is a chair that had carved in the back of the chair a sun, that is to say, the sun that shines in the sky. And as one looked at that carving on the chair, and Franklin bemused and reflected on this as these guys were setting about the business that they were taking on with that declaration. And he some people mused, well, is it a rising sun or is it a setting sun? And Franklin said, it is a rising sun. It is a rising sun. So I think for us, as we gather here, and viewers, no one has really called in to ask us about this. But there is a question.
Not yet.
Is that a setting sun or a rising sun?
Well, I think that's a rising sun.
I think it's a rising sun,
I do too.
Here we go.
Too.
And with that, we may want to return to Philadelphia, not to the years of Ben Franklin, but here.
So how do you respond to a crazy world? How do you respond when people, can't see beyond the outside? How do you respond when there is no dignity of difference, as the great Rabbi Jonathan Sacks taught us and framed? Well, I think we see last night, the beginning of the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, and we saw models of response at the Republican National Convention. The great challenge is, can you rise above the rhetoric, the name-calling, the nastiness, the partisanship? In some cases, when it comes to the now nominated candidate in the Republican field, and the Republican, party, sort of 7th, 8th grade, behavior, which is just crazy to me. It seems absurd, Tell me, and we can't help but talk about the Democratic National Convention. You may be able to guess, and I will say this, and I've said it many times in other shows. You can count the number of our episodes. We have around 800 episodes. I feel very akin to this man on almost every single issue. We didn't plan it. We're just friends. We see life very similarly. Our spiritualities, it's just what it is. I am as close to this man as I am to any rabbi, and probably much closer than some right-wing, Orthodox rabbis. He and I vote the same in the same camp, in the same booth.
There we are. But you're a Red Sox fan, and I'm a Phillies fan, and
so we both know
we've learned to live together.
Yes, we have.
In the ballpark of life.
Yes, we have.
Brothers and sisters. Yeah. There we go.
Well,
there we go. But to the point, I mean, and I I pause and stammer a bit because it's hard to behold and comprehend just what we're witnessing, over these days in these United States of America. We've come from some language, dare I say, rhetoric that would say it's midnight in America, and
right.
We're going to make it great again. To as we heard it this past 24-hour news cycle, and quite frankly, last night, and that would have been the 25th of July in Philadelphia, around about 10 o'clock. Michelle Obama took the stage and was, I thought, stunning, and with her note as to more of the element of yes, America is great. Don't let anyone tell you it's not. And there is a mourning. That is to say, MORNING, as opposed to MOURNING in America before us. And maybe that's a little bit of the polemic. That's, oh my goodness. Here we go. Well, look at this. The pepper arrives with the oatmeal. Do people use pepper on their oatmeal?
They do.
Yeah. It's kind of like.
But tastes like cinnamon.
Yeah, it is like cinnamon. It kind of like it makes it. It's kind of like a mole. It's kind of like a Mexican thing with the brown sugar. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Abel.
Oh my gosh. Well, this is kind of new. We'll pause on that note to say, the food is before us.
Do a little motzi.
I'm glad to break bread. Thanks be to God for the bread of life.
Baruch atah Adonai Elohim melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Indeed.
Amen.
And at the heart of companionship is pan, bread. And the bread we break with great thanks to God. Amen.
Amen.
You gotta love rye bread. Here we go.
Levy's rye. I think it was Levy's rye. Am I right?
I think so. For all the days that we've been here, and I don't know if there's a purpose for this, we have not gone into the kitchen. Are we allowed in the kitchen?
I think. First of all, I don't think we can, because we are not sterile.
Oh my God.
I don't mean that in the sense that we can't have children, God forbid. I mean that we can't just walk in with our dirty hands.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day we could talk to our producer, Mike Charles, and the staff of Mike and Lake Charles, and what a team, huh?
Yeah.
And have an on-site thing behind the scenes in the kitchen. How about that? You want your eggs with cheese? Make them yourself. Here's how. Well, should we go back to Philadelphia?
We're back in Philly.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, jumping back and forth, Philadelphia, Cleveland. Before we get to Philly, I mentioned Michelle Obama's speech. I have to say that I found myself watching last night, but also watching last week.
I watch every night of the Republican National Convention.
And I have to say that there were some good speeches last week. I thought Ted Cruz, up until a point. I thought Ivanka Trump had some very good speeches. Ted Cruz, for Republicans among us, I think you could go to school on that speech to a degree. He called Republicans to recognize that we're the party that brought along, or thanks to Lincoln, the party of Lincoln indeed, the emancipation of the slaves. I mean, there was something rather distinct. He took on, and we didn't hear this from other Republican speakers, the matter of the police shootings of Alton Avery, in Baton Rouge, as well as the shooting of Philandro Castile in St. Paul, as well as the Dallas police being shot in Dallas, of course. And then Ivanka Trump talked about equal pay for women. And that was kind of striking and distinct. There was a lot of other rhetoric that was issued forth from speeches there, including the slam and the bombast about and against Hillary Clinton. I mean, to hear the shouting, "Lock her up, lock her up," was really.
And that's the problem. That if you're a mainstream Republican, and as it says, some of my dearest friends are Republican. No, truth be told, be a mainstream Republican, be a centrist, and understand. Take a look. Who are you going to vote for? How do you vote with any integrity? For a man who really doesn't represent Republican values, who is the furthest thing from a Reagan Republican that we can name. Reagan, great bridge builder, compromise, reach across the aisles. A national figure, trying to repair international bridges, my God, Trump, NATO. I mean, never mind the questions with the Soviet Union, with Russia, the FSU. So it's just astounding to me.
Well, there lies, I think, one critical piece, and to listen to some commentators, to wit, David Brooks. It's not the Republican Party that some have known it or seen it. It really is the party of Donald Trump. It's become that in certain and distinct ways. And to even hear Donald Trump say, "It's been the summer of Donald Trump," I'm quoting, or the spring of Donald Trump, and the Christmas of Donald Trump. I mean, it's Trump, Trump, Trump. It's the label. He brandishes that, with some really distinct rhetoric and Twitter account stuff. He's not a Reagan Republican, much to the chagrin of so many folks. Well, Paul Ryan is the party chair and kind of nominal at that, given this era of Trump. And so, what will we see, post this election? We could very well see Donald Trump is president in the White House. And whether we do or not, look for something different in the entity that is the Republican Party. I mean, there are some who will sit this election out from both parties, who will wait for the next iteration. And that's kind of the thesis of some people like David Brooks. I mean, so here we are on July 26th in 2016. What about July 26th, 2020? I don't think we're going to see the landscape as we see.
No, I don't think so either. I think that the affirmation, and it was made clear. I was listening to NPR. And you can say, "Oh, NPR, it's that left wing," No. It was a commentator on NPR who actually is a registered Republican. He made clear, but he's talking about the nature of anger and what it is. And he said, why does the Republican Party think that former Bernie supporters, people who were for Bernie Sanders, and we saw last night Bernie Sanders at the convention. We saw him earlier in the day having a tough time handling his own people because they have such disappointment, understandably. But Bernie Sanders did not only the right thing, but aligned with his own values, worked behind the scenes on the Democratic National Platform to make sure that as many of his policies, and he said it out loud to his people, and that was a reason. It made so much sense that Bernie stands up and says, "I'm with her. I will do everything I can to make certain that Hillary Clinton is the next president of the United States." Why? Because it would be an affront to everything he stands for and has fought for in his political career, to have a man like Donald Trump, and a man that represents the values that Trump represents. And we're not quite sure what those values always are, which is really the great challenge. So I would say last night just gave me, and I'm not the one saying it, I'm listening to political pundits, really commentators across the spectrum. The only person who didn't give, really just overwhelming praise for both Bernie Sanders, certainly Michelle Obama, Cory Booker, even Elizabeth Warren, there's a guy who's a Trump guy who's he has white hair. He's a commentator.
It was on CNN, yeah.
He's on CNN. I just forget his name. And he's a smart guy. He's articulate, but he won't go there. But every other commentator said that when Michelle Obama walked into the room, it united everybody in the room. There was a sense of quiet and calm and focus that nobody else could bring. And when she quite frankly said, I am living in the White House with my black children, and my husband, an African American family, a house built by slaves. Who would think, who could dream of a land? This is the greatest country. We don't have to make it great.
Well, that's another note in the midst of all this. I think, and the note being speeches, speech writing, the verb noun speechification has been, issued and presented.
Right.
And what's kind of to take a couple steps back is to look and listen to the rhetoric and how the speakers comport themselves. I mean, for Michelle Obama, here she is, the First Lady, the first, African American black, First Lady, obviously married to the first black president. That in itself, just to see her speaks of that. Yeah. And then for her to use the language, we live in the house, everybody knows the house, don't they? Built by slaves. Everybody knows what that means.
Yep.
And to think about, I don't have the history. Maybe, Mike and Lake could tell us when that White House was built. And because clearly it was built, antebellum, it was built, as so much in this country was, built by slaves, and those, subscripted, not even subscripted, no choice, to forced labor. I mean, that's America's original sin.
Yeah.
And look at our commerce, look at our economy, look at so many things that got started, because of that, at the hands of that, with blood, sweat, toil, and tears that, was in place because of slavery. She just utters those words. She presents herself on camera. That speaks volumes. And she went on from there with grace, with clarity, with purpose, and with affirmation to this country's rising sun.
And Reverend Bill, what didn't she do? What name didn't she mention? She didn't say the name Donald Trump. She didn't need to say it.
She didn't.
Did she? I don't remember saying it.
No, she didn't. She didn't. But she talked about, she did not mention Donald Trump, if I recall correctly.
I don't think she...
But she did mention some things about who would say what. About, not being able to tweet it or whatever, say it in 140 characters. That was a not so oblique reference.
No, definitely a reference.
But not so oblique reference to Donald Trump without doing that. She didn't go there. She went, as she said, she taught her daughters, and it's there among the Obama family, when others go low, we will go high.
We will go high.
And I think that was probably one of the central pieces and comments in the midst of what was and will be, mark this, a wonderful, outstanding speech for the ages. It will be difficult to see if, and I don't know when Barack himself is scheduled, but to see who will surpass that in terms of the quality of that rhetoric.
But I will say this in terms of President Obama, and really going back to your opening and really setting the tone of the rampage violent acts and really terror against humankind, that have been perpetrated over the past month, just a month since we sat here, from Baton Rouge to Dallas and so many other places, Nice, France. After the shooting, I'm trying to remember if it was the Dallas shooting or if it was I think it was the Baton Rouge shooting. It was a Sunday, right? It was the next day was Sunday. I'm pretty sure.
No.
No.
You know, if you're talking Sunday,
When Obama came on TV.
what we didn't
in the afternoon.
mention, it was. You're probably talking Sunday, 2 a.m.
Oh gosh,
on
you're
June,
right. I
June
am.
12th. You're talking Orlando.
I'm not going to land.
You're talking.
No.
Well, that was a Sunday. That was a Sunday morning.
No. So when would it have? No. But when would it have been that Obama came on a Sunday afternoon? It was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. It couldn't have been more than a week or 2 weeks ago. Here's what he said. It had to be last. It was the week before the RNC. It was 2 weeks ago. Here's what Obama said, and somebody after it, when I was on the phone with them, another rabbi said, it doesn't, and he's right. He said, it doesn't matter how you vote. Looking at presidential candidates that are up for potential election, I will miss Obama because his grace under fire, his ability to be articulate, to be a gracious and elegant, but almost a presence of stature and honor. He said, we have 2 conventions coming up. He just said it like a week and a half ago. It's going to start. The RNC is going to start in just a day or two. What we have to do is not try to score points with rhetoric, political points. This is not the time for extremist language. What we have to do is temper our words and open our hearts, direct quote. And I thought, boom, that's it. That's it. This is a man who understands and who put it right out there as the leader of our nation.
Well, I mean, whatever that Sunday was, because there was a succession of weeks.
Yeah, well,
one week and weekend. I mentioned the days and moments.
I believe it was right
Sunday
before.
service.
So yeah.
June 12th, you had Orlando. Then the next week, here came Baton Rouge and St. Paul. Then here came Dallas. Then here came Nice. Prior to that, back in time, you had San Bernardino. I say San Bernardino because much different from Obama was some of the rhetoric on the other side. I mean, Donald Trump appeared at Liberty University soon after the shooting in San Bernardino, California. Liberty University, mind you, the president of which is Jerry Falwell Jr., son of Jerry Falwell, in terms of, the Christian right.
Yeah.
Jerry Falwell Jr. introduced Donald Trump. Donald Trump went on to say that if people had handguns, that San Bernardino incident would not have occurred, or at least the killer, the shooter, would have been stopped. Responding to that was president of the university, Jerry Falwell Jr., who said, yes, in effect, amen to that. And he, urged and invited the students at his university, because I don't know if Virginia is a carrying state, a term that we've come to know now, but he basically said, yes, if we all have that, we will, stop those, those Muslim, and he used Muslim. And with that, he said, and right now, I have one on my person.
Oh my God.
So here's a president of a university, inviting and introducing a presidential candidate, who is all about, yes, having people bear arms, and that will stop all this violence. Right. Now, mind you, this is in the aftermath of the bloodshed and the carnage. Much different from what you're citing with regard to President Obama.
Yes.
I mean, Obama, and any president, does he, or gulp, she not, come to realize that they are the commander, or they become the commander in grief. And so how does a president take that on?
Yeah.
One of the things that's been notable to me in the succession from back to Bill Clinton on to George Bush, the younger, was that Bill Clinton could be pictured and seen at Dover Air Force Base.
Yep.
When
bodies were coming
fallen
back.
soldiers were coming back, and and a flag draped casket, and there in the airport hangar, we saw the president. him greeting and consoling and reaching out to those families of the victims.
Yeah.
For some reason, during the Bush administration, we no longer had that picture.
No.
And that was into our war, and rather than have that on our telephone screens, because maybe we learned about what that was like when we did it in Vietnam.
Right.
But nonetheless, here comes a public person, the commander-in-chief, who's cast into this element in a moment of grief.
Yeah,
and how
boy.
does he or she comport
How often
themselves?
has Obama had to
And
be in that role?
And Obama's done that. Quite frankly, we could compare and talk about, seeing each of these presidential candidates in that role. I have to say, and that I have a hard time seeing, although he says he's the law and order candidate and I'm the compassionate candidate, the candidate of compassion, he being Donald Trump.
Donald Trump, yeah.
I have a hard time seeing him consoling and grieving. This is a man who said about John McCain, he's not a hero because he lived, The only heroes in my mind are those who are dead. It's kind of like he's calling people losers. He's decrying the victims.
Yeah, but
how does such a person console? How does he issue forth compassion?
I don't want to lose the point, though, because you made too good a point, Reverend Belly. The point is this, folks. The point is this: that you can say that the lone shooter in Dallas did not do what he did because it was gun violence, because of guns. That wasn't the core of the concern, as did the sheriff who spoke. Maybe it's he's a regional officer in, at the RNC in Cleveland, African American. I forget his name,
yeah.
but he, and he's trying to say guns is not the problem, the issue. I'm a big sports fan, I watch the ESPYs every year. They were just on a week and a half ago. The ESPYs are ESPN Sports Awards, and they give awards to all kinds of athletes. But they also give awards for courage, and they do a lot of human interest stories. Not a lot, but a number. Robin, what's her name? Robertson. Who's the African American Channel 7 national? Robin.
It's not Robin. Yeah, it's next to George Stephanopoulos.
Right. She's great. So she won a couple of years ago. She was undergoing, chemotherapy, but also she was an elegant, gracious, in her fight. This year, one of the Courage Awards, and it could have been the Courage Award, was won by Xavier Dobson. Who's that Xavier Dobson? He is a 16-year-old. He's a 16-year-old who lives in the suburbs, I'm pretty sure, of Detroit. He was a kid who had an older brother, just a year older, and then a much older brother. He was a kid who was raised by a single African-American mom, cousins in the neighborhood. Didn't live in the best neighborhood of Detroit, and I'm pretty sure it's Detroit, but I may be wrong. But so Xavier Dobson's on the high school football team. He's hanging around with his brother. He goes out with to hang around on the front porch with his two cousins, and there's a drive-by shooting, and shots start being fired, and his two cousins are two girls who are maybe 2 or 3 years younger, and they duck down, and he's a big boy. He is maybe, I think, a lineman or a linebacker for his high school football team. He jumps on top of them.
Wow.
He is shot 4 times and killed. They're unharmed.
Oh my gosh.
This is a boy who would sort of vote in the 8th grade, most likely to succeed. If you're not telling me, this is, and so they sort of featured his story, and then his mom and his brothers got up there, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house. All these athletes, were just, and the reason they were is because guns take lives. I believe the last figure was there are 91 deadly shootings a day in America. It's beyond. It's just beyond us. And so, easy access, to the kind of weaponry that is just unnecessary to be in the hands of human beings. Guns are not the answer.
Well, and it's real interesting to hear the dance with the conventions. Listening closely to Mr. Trump last week, it wasn't sotto voce, under the table or quiet.
No.
It's hardly ever that with Donald Trump. But I mean, what I heard him say was with, some pride and boastfulness that he's gotten the endorsements of all of these groups, among them Christian evangelicals, which is befuddling to me. More on that in a moment, perhaps. But he said with pride that he got the endorsement of the NRA. And with that, the House erupted in cheers. And oh my gosh, that's one thing as we see it on the, on the top on the dais there with that comment. But what that means insofar as the contributions to those elected officials and the systematic effort of the NRA. And Wayne LaPierre, the president of the NRA, has said nothing about the access to those guns, the automatic weapons that were accessible. And so in terms of legislation, we've had a Congress that since 1994 has backed off from any legislation to prohibit the sale and the access to automatic weapons, much less other particular issues of trafficking, as well as background checks. Those have been systematic. Yet that not a peep out of the Republican candidate with regard to that. In fact, the brandishing, much like weapons are brandished, that good seal from the NRA that he gets as a candidate. And on the other side of that, I think there's some voices, I don't hear them in the Democratic Party, but I'm glad to say it here, right on the Reverend, the Rabbi. Do we need a Second Amendment? Do we need a Second Amendment in this country right now? I mean, back in the day, 240 years ago, when Ben Franklin, did I tell you about Ben Franklin and the Rising Sun? Okay.
You did.
Back in Philadelphia. When the British, weren't even knocking on the doors; they were barging in. Okay, and so the citizens' right to bear arms was to protect their turf and territory, over against an oppressor, and a colonial, empire, wanting to clamp down. Do we need that right now? And is there any discussion along those lines? Because there's a real streak of libertarian in this country, that with the backing of the NRA and such support, we now in this country, those 91, deaths per day. That's accurate. Let's verify that with our research team.
I think it is.
But we have more guns in this country than we have people.
Absurd.
I mean, and people will say, well, we have the Second Amendment. We need that Second Amendment. Oh my gosh, do we? And look at the consequence of that.
Yeah.
And even if you want to have a bear handgun or get a .22 to go shoot Bambi, you can get a license for that. But do we need automatic weapons? Can we we tolerate the trafficking of guns, across borders and gun shows? And that needs to be clamped down. Law enforcement officials and others will speak to that resoundingly. Not to mention, the basics of background checks and the red flags, that would have stopped, some of the shooters and killers that we've seen recently. So
there are lots of core issues, folks, and they were ticked off wonderfully, I would say, by Bernie Sanders, and in the last speech of the night last night. And if you saw it, you know. If you didn't, just to note, what he did was to say, here's what we know we have accomplished. Here's what Hillary has accomplished, which is great and honorable and important and vast. And here's how Donald Trump, representing the Republican Party, would respond. And you name an issue. Immigration.
He was pretty copious and deliberate.
Oh my God, he was so deliberate.
And the fact is that he's given that speech for the past 18 months.
Well, so but the speech he gave last night.
Well, but he's really hit on those points.
No, the same points. But it was of course affirming. Listen, Hillary Clinton and I disagree on some issues.
He was good.
But we agree on so much more.
Now the thing that I thought was really special and sweet was, aside from all the speechification, and again, some really notable things with Michelle Obama. I thought Elizabeth Warren was good. Cory Booker was kind of, I think, pleased. I mean, he was really moved when they started chanting his name. But how about this? I mean, first night, we got some juice. We were wondering, will this be boring or whatever? And conventions can be. But we had Al Franken and Sarah Silverman come on. And,
Silverman.
And so we had a young comedian and an older comedian who's now a senator.
Yeah.
I thought Franken was vintage Franken, just like back to the SNL days.
He's funny.
He said, he's here to endorse, or he identified himself as a graduate of Trump University with a PhD in megalomania. I thought that was great comedy.
Yeah, no, Franken.
And he said it's the best. It's the second best university in the world for degrees in megalomania, second only to the University of Bernie Madoff. Really quite sweet. And then here came Sarah, who needed to realize, and I thought Al was helpful with her, that she's not in a comedy club.
Yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
And so, here she came playfully and coyly, kind of, sidling with Franken, and that was kind of sweet. And then the Bernie people, it was still early in the program, and they were kind of ranting and chanting. So for Sarah to turn to them and saying, "You're being ridiculous," was not helpful.
No.
Was not helpful. Now, Al tried to reel her in, but then what happened was kind of masterful because they stalled and did a little tap dance, buying some time. He used the word bridge. For those who might have been thinking, what does bridge mean? Here came Paul Simon singing Bridge Over Troubled Waters.
Yeah.
I mean, so moving. That was really
awesome.
lovely. A 74-year-old Paul Simon.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't matter.
He can't hit the notes like he did, but my gosh, the heart was there.
Doesn't matter.
The heart was
It doesn't
there.
matter. Yeah. He's no JT, meaning James Taylor, not Justin Timberlake. But no. Who can still hit the notes.
Yeah, no, but that was, I thought that was, and Mark Shields up in the broadcast booth with the PBS team wound up saying he thought it was exquisitely done. It was almost like, was all that choreographed? Because they needed, Al and Sarah needed to diffuse.
Yeah,
it was like a football game. Hillary, Bernie.
Yeah.
And the Hillary people basically, reeled in their people.
Do not antagonize. That's right. That's right.
So we got, we got through that rather well.
So it's about a sense of unity of purpose. So no matter how you are registered to vote, think about the unity in the union for which we stand. And what does that union represent? And what are the values that you hold? And if you look at either candidate, who is closest to those values? This is not an 8th grade election. This is not a popularity contest. It doesn't matter if you love or are in love with the candidate. That's not what it's about. It's not a test of egos. Who has the larger ego? This is about values and about a vision for our country and our nation. And so that is how you need to vote. And you need to vote. Also think about the religious values you hold and how that integrates. I can't tell you how to vote, nor would I begin to do that. That's not my place, nor my purpose. But what I can say is that your vote is a reflection of your sense of identity and your place in the world and how you view, what we are as human beings and what we are trying to accomplish together. If that is best represented by either party, that's how you want to vote. That's how you want to vote in either candidate. Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Well, I'm not, and that's interesting because I'm not sure. We heard it last night, and I think qualitatively, just judging on night one, when we got to the halfway mark, and then especially with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, we heard issues. I mean, and
oh no.
But I want to say this insofar as there's some critical ones. I mean, you're right. I mean, you posit a very good invitation for folks. There's a note from Mike that I can't read. Can you read that?
36 Americans are killed by gun violence a day. It could be 91 people are shot. I don't know.
Yeah, I wondered about that. That's helpful. And so, for those of you who are taking notes, it's 36 Americans are shot.
Yeah. Don't take notes.
If you think about that, meet with death at the result of shooting. If you think about that, that's distinctly more than one every hour, across this country.
Yeah.
But in terms of those issues, I think there's some stark ones. I mean, Bernie, let's make no mistake. Bernie had a premier role last night there at the convention. Prior to him stepping up to speak, you didn't see him in the green room. You saw him up, in one of the family sections with his grandchildren. A little bit, please. Thank you very much, Abel.
Thanks, Abel.
One more ice,
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thanks.
If you thought about it, Bernie is not a Democrat. Bernie is a socialist. Bernie, yes, independent, yes, a socialist, not necessarily a card-carrying Democrat, yet, was there at the Democratic Convention campaigning and winning big in the primaries for that place on the Democratic ticket. And, it may very well be, and, our fact checker can check this, that was his very first convention.
Maybe.
It may very well be. Again, I'd like to verify that, but the fact is that he came before that convention and he was really on point with his successive issues. A couple of them were really reflecting,
his own socialist roots.
Indeed. Now it's interesting to hear and see and sense the effect of that on the Democratic Party platform and on Hillary. I mean, to wit, Barack Obama was kind of tepid but critical of the Citizens United decision. Bernie took it on full force.
Yep.
Bernie, behind the scenes as well as right up front with Hillary said, this has to be repealed. And that's now a part of the Democratic Party platform, which is a critical concern in this country. And not only that, listen to what he said. He named the Koch brothers. He named, the money
he has no problem
behind
naming.
that. Okay?
And
that's a critical issue in this country
how
right now.
about he came, very proudly, he said, after meeting with and coming very close on many core issues, what did you say? 83% of those who, of people, anybody whose family income is $120,000, $125,000 or less, will be able to go to a public, funded college university,
right.
Tuition free.
Right.
I mean, come on, that would not be without Bernie.
Right.
Would not be.
Bernie brought that in, and Hillary obviously, balked and backed on that, as she did with. The minimum wage. I mean, she came up and along on that, thanks to Bernie.
Right, and these
but
are
in terms of that statistic, it's worth repeating because, this is something that public education in this country, which is a challenge, it needs to be, strong and viable. It is certainly where we live, in our zip codes, but not the case, across this country. So you could talk about the federalization. You could talk about basic standards. A federal minimum wage is in some people's minds, a radical thought. Bring it up to $15. It's happening in New York State, thanks to Cuomo. In a couple of years, it'll be in place. But nationwide, it is not.
Yeah.
And over against the fact that if it's $7.25 or $7.50
is that true that Donald Trump said he wants to give states the right?
Well, that's it. But here's where
$7.25.
This is why I'm glad to parse and explicate your earlier statement about the issues. These are some critical and decisive issues.
Oh yes.
The minimum wage, the access to public education, the matters of Citizen United. I mean, that Supreme Court ruling. Remember when, Obama, made that comment in the State of the Union address, decrying Citizen United. Now, Obama is a constitutional lawyer, a law teacher, and it was Judge Alito who sat and shook his head no. But therein lies a real critical issue. That court, by a one-vote margin, gave, the credence and support for corporations having the rights of people in their speaking.
Yep.
And so you've got the flow of money. A great book to read by Jane Mayer, is called Dark Money.
Oh, you mentioned it.
And she explicates, the power and the force and the flow of money behind, the candidates, particularly as we think about, those to the right. She also wrote the most recent piece in the New Yorker, help me with the name of the co-author of The Art of the Deal. The co-author with Donald Trump.
Oh, Donald Trump, he's the co-author. I thought the writer of The Art of the Deal.
But the co-author, but he was really the guy who
was
put
just
it together. And he really, Mike can get that for us, but this most recent, she talks about him as being Donald Trump's Boswell. And she talks about, and really is an explication in which he puts forth, what he did to write that book along with, and in many ways, for Donald Trump.
Right, how Donald Trump wanted to be seen as a heavy, seen as a thug.
And even when and how he did it. Here we get the name here.
Tony Schwartz, that's right, Tony Schwartz.
Tony Schwartz.
Who I sat next to.
Really?
Yeah, I sat next to at
story,
10 years ago.
What a story that is. Now, so along the line of your urging our folks to consider the issues and whatever.
Your parsing issues is crucial.
Talk very specifically about what they mean, because they have consequence. Not to mention, look at what's happening with our Supreme Court. I mean, the next president is likely to appoint 3 or 4.
Yeah, no, for sure. But don't lose this. What Reverend Bill is pointing out is this. He's giving us the answer. How do you respond to an angry nation? How do you respond to guns in the wrong hands and the ability of people to act out and lash out in violent acts of, inhumanity, of murder, of terror? How do you respond to that? Well, you respond by giving people a living wage. You respond by raising the level of dignity and human respect in neighborhoods where it hasn't been prevalent. You respond by saying, we're going to teach you the values with higher education and make that possible for almost any child to come to a college or university and to learn. And we're going to try to diminish those boundaries that have been stopping, children of the inner city or children of, rural, America in certain senses, but from coming and attending college. So the response of of Bernie Sanders, clearly, and of the Democratic Party, for sure, is a response that is sane and humane.
Yeah. Sane and humane, I think, is really well put, and I'm eager to parse everything the Rabbi says in these moments, because, I mean,
this is my, in Hebrew it would be metorgaman, my interpreter.
Well, but to think about what that means in the practice and the practicality of the issues that we noted. But here comes a couple more that we haven't yet mentioned, and that is policing in America.
Sure.
I won't jump to say police brutality.
No.
Policing in America is tough. And I think our president, Michelle said it last night in a rather distinct ways. He knows that issues aren't black or white, and to look at policing in America right now is really touching. Those moments in Dallas, here are Black Lives Matter marchers, and here are cops protecting them from the shooter who guns 5 of their number down. Yeah. And so in the moments, and here comes another moment for the president, the commander-in-chief, who steps forward, who talks about the difficulty and the problem of being a police officer, in the midst of the prevailing attitude, as well as what it means to be black, given that blacks are 30% more likely to be pulled over. Philando Castile was pulled over for a broken taillight. Would that happen as readily to you or me?
And let me just tell you about the Wayne Powell story. Wayne Powell is Bishop Wayne Powell of the Straight Gate Church, wonderful, black community, Pentecostal, in Mamaroneck, but really drawing from around the area, but has been since his grandfather founded the church. Wayne Powell tells the story of being pulled over in Mamaroneck for a broken light, I think it was, when he was 16 or 17. Yeah. And the police, saying, well, looking at his license, saying, Powell, what are you, the Powell kid? Get home.
Yeah.
But he thought, how vulnerable is he?
Well, there you go. And there's some elements that speak of a community conscience and sensitivity. That here is a police officer who has some regard and is held in regard and won't be reactionary. We need and want that, and so sensitivity. As police bring that is terribly important, alongside what it means to be black in America. Yeah. Black lives do matter, but I'm rather touched by how in the aftermath of one of these shootings, and was it Dallas, Obama called a White House conference together with police rep as well as Black Lives Matter folks. And there was reckoning and respect for the positions and the realities of each. I rather hope for that, and can we not expect that attitude and sensitivity from a president, as opposed to the reactionary stuff that we're getting and fro. Going forward with this whole matter right now, let's see what happens in terms of that vital and critical issue, because it's tough to be a cop in America.
Yeah.
The most recent Sunday Times article, and maybe you saw the picture above the fold.
Yeah, of course I did.
It
Yeah.
was in
Yeah.
Hiram, Georgia.
Yeah.
There was a police car that pulled over.
And the minister was pulled over to pray with
The
him.
minister is
A
Reverend,
night shift.
Reverend Dwayne Hewitt in Hiram, Georgia, a Baptist pastor.
Wonderful.
Who I have just sent a note to, because I wanted very much to just note that I'm praying for him and I appreciate his prayers for that officer. One can only surmise that here it was a night shift, and this guy, the pastor, known in the community, made it a point to stop with this guy and let him know that he was being prayed for and here's concern for him. And you can't even think and imagine what that means for that officer.
Yeah.
There was the guy in Baton Rouge, Montel, a police officer. Montel,
The African American guy.
the African American guy
who did that video.
who did the Facebook
Facebook
thing.
post. Yes.
And he was among those killed.
Yeah. Oh my
later.
God.
But he said, I love this community, but I walk around in my uniform, and I don't feel loved.
That's right.
I take my uniform off. He's a black man.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm a threat,
Right.
or I'm feeling like I'm perceived to be a threat.
Yeah.
I can't win for losing.
That's right.
And he put his heart out there in this YouTube,
Yeah,
snippet.
it was beautiful.
And then we saw his face, and we saw that caption on the morning
Yeah.
after that he was slain. That bespeaks of the plight in so many ways.
So what's at stake is great, and what's at stake is the future of the union that we share, and it is building a bridge to those who otherwise would not be naturally connected to us.
Yeah.
It's reaching beyond ourselves. It's acknowledging that there is, in fact, a dignity to difference, that it is wonderful to live in this place of great diversity, that the sun is rising. It's not setting and getting dark. This is not the midnight hour. And so the gift of the moment is to celebrate that by actualizing our civic responsibility.
The rabbi's going sermonic on us. And
No,
that's
I
kind of
want
a
you to
blessing
know.
as we
I'm
go.
just trying to summarize what he said so articulately, which is to say, it says in the Talmud, "Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor." It is not upon you to finish the work. Velo ata pater libatel mimena. You may not ignore it. However. Meaning, you got to get out there. You got to do it.
Yeah, and here we are. It's
I just want to say,
July 26th.
this guy barely touched it because he was so into the conversation.
And you in the meantime,
I finished my eggs.
you're the president of the Clean Plate Club.
I am.
I think so. I think so.
I know I can be president of something.
Yeah, well, speaking of president, soon when we get into 2017, we're going to have a new president. I think it could be either one.
It could be.
I
So
say this
please,
with
please,
a heavy,
God,
with a
God,
heavy,
vote.
with a heavy and an anxious
Vote.
heart. But
Folks, vote.
I think we've come through a year in which the presumptive candidate in the Republican Party, we couldn't think that he might be on the ticket. He's on the ticket. Now there's a thought, oh my gosh, as we look at the polls even this day, it's
so
going
get
to be
out
a
there.
very tight
Get out
race.
there. Get out
Indeed,
there.
people do need to vote. God bless us all. God bless America.
Red Sox are in second place right now. Where are the Phillies?
Way down.
Way down.
Take care, brother.
Good to see you, my
All
friend.
righty.
God bless.
God bless. God bless.